The rail line from Honeysuckle arrived at East Maitland Station, which is now Victoria Street, on the 30th of March 1857, and at West Maitland on the 27th of July 1858. And the first Maitland Station was at the bottom of Elgin Street, just behind us. So if you like to hand out number 1 photo. So that was the first railway station over there on the corner of Elgin Street, and then 1879 they started to build this. We don't pay enough attention to it. We just walk through and get on the train, and we don't stop to actually look at the station. This was finally opened in January of 1880. It's modelled on Goulburn Railway Station. That was the ladies' waiting room with the bay windows, 14 foot by 16 foot, with all necessary amenities supplied for the ladies. And all the sandstone is local sandstone from Ravensfield, and which is the best sandstone in the world. Now, when they built this, they thought they'd build it above flood level. So the platform itself is 2 foot 9 inches above the rails, and the concourse is 9 foot above the rail level. But like when they built the town hall, they didn't allow for bigger floods. So consequently, they've had bigger floods and they've had the water right up on the concourse. From the earliest days of settlement, the natural floodway has taken the railway line. You come through Hexham swamps, you're there on the floodway, and then you come through here. And the most important part of the railway line in New South Wales is this half a kilometre between Maitland Station and Trzynski Bridge, because it carries the lines to the north coast and the northwest. The first train reached East Maitland on July. In August of 57 they had a big flood, and the train from Newcastle got as far as Hexham. It ran off the rails and the second carriage went into the water. A gentleman called John Smith was in that carriage, and he got most upset and wrote a letter to the Maitland Mercury saying how disgusting it was that they couldn't run the railway, and he had to walk back to Newcastle. And on his way across the Ironbark Bridge, he fell through the wooden bridge, so he wasn't real happy. In 1913, there was an interruption because of the flood, and what they were doing, they were transshipping the people from Farley and Talara around to High Street and then onto the trams to run through to Morpeth, and then they were on the steamers to Newcastle and then more trains. And one of the ones that got caught up in that was Billy Hughes, and he was throwing his weight around in Maitland, so they told him the wrong information and he missed the Warraneen, the last steamer to go out of Morpeth that day, so he wasn't amused. If you like to hand out number 2, this is a steam tram crossing over at Pitnacree. And number 3 shows the steamer Warraneen leaving Morpeth for the trip downriver with a hunter in full flood. So you can imagine what sort of a trip they had. There's another little instance in June 1949. There was a goods train stranded alongside the sheds here in Maitland Station, and the Mercury reported that cases of fish and rabbits and cans of milk were taken from the chiller wagon and distributed to flood victims before they went bad. So it just shows you what the difference was in what the trains actually carried: fish and rabbits. And of course rabbits were underground mutton of the day and quite sought after delicacy by some. When we get on to Maitland Station, we're going on to platforms 2 and 3, and what we're going to do, we're going to talk about what happened around Maitland Station. Maitland Station, if you draw a circle of 2k radius around Maitland Station, 10 of our 11 deaths in 1955 happened within that circle. So we'll talk about that. When you first go down onto the platform, immediately on your left and right, you'll see the floodgates that are part of the ring levy, and they're tested every 6 months. They're very well balanced, and one person can open and close them. when you're on the station, if you just look a bit up to your right, and the electric wires on your right, that's where Vince Hughes and Bobby Smith fell off the helicopter line onto the high tension wires and were electrocuted. If you look away about halfway along the line between Maitland Station and Trzcinski Bridge, that was where the northern signal box was. And there were 7 men trapped in that. And then when it collapsed, the helicopter picked up Vince Hughes and Bobby Smith. And then if you look to the left of the platform, about 100 yards along, you'll see where the helicopter crashed. These are the shots of the helicopter and how they crashed at the time. So if you just pass them around and make sure everyone gets a look. They speak for themselves. The only thing to notice in these shots that the helicopter's cable got tangled in the power lines. That did not happen. In number 5, you'll see the men falling. You'll see 4 horizontal lines across the photo. That's just a fault in the photo. That is not the power lines. You'll see the power lines down towards the bottom. When the men dropped off the hook, it overbalanced the helicopter and it went nose down, and then he either went onto the bridge and killed 100 people or pancaked into the water. So all he did was pancake it straight into the water, about 100 yards up the line from the station. I'm glad you all found them very interesting. Now, with your handout number 4, this is an aerial shot taken around 11 a.m. on Friday the 25th of February 1955. Look in particular the water coming down off the railway line into water south of the line, and the signal box is still standing. Number 5, this shot around the peak of the flood, probably taken on the Saturday morning. Take note of the location of the pedestrian bridge as it can be used in the landmark in other photos. Righto, we're going to walk down onto platform 2 and 3. Just be careful on the steps because they're pretty steep. As you go through on the concourse, just look down on your left as you walk onto the top concourse and you'll see 3 marks. And they are 1949, 1893 and 1955. They're the most reliable marks in Maitland of the 1955 flood. Let's go. See here, 55, 93 and 49. There's 4'3" difference between the 49 and the 55, and there's 18 inches between the 55 and the 93. We're going down onto that western end of numbers 2 and 3. Just wait up the top, don't go down the stairs, just wait up the top up there. Righto, let's go. If you'd all like to hand out number 6, 7, 8 and 9. These 4 photos show the rescue of Bert Holwood and Frank Conlon one at a time from the single stanchion and landed safely on the overhead bridge just out here on the road. If you look down onto this 2 and 3 platform, number 10 is a photo from 1930. And the water was flowing over nearly 2.5 feet deep over the platforms at West Maitland. An early resumption of railway operations at West Maitland is not very probable. Newcastle Morning Herald, the 21st of June 1930. If you'd like to put out number 11 and 12, this shows carriages stranded in platform in the 1949 flood of June. And that is the best way of telling the difference between a 55 photo and a 49 photo. There were no trains trapped in the platforms in 55. If they've got trains trapped in the platforms, they're 1949. Would you like to hand out number 13? Number 13 is showing a couple of dish lickers being brought to safety from rising floodwaters on the Sunday morning of the 19th of June 1949. You're all good? Yep. Okay, we'll go down on the platform 2 and 3.
Come this way just a bit. Don't stand on the sun there. Come this way just a bit. Don't stand on the sun there.
Okay, number 14. This is showing the engines just at the end of this of number 2 and number 4, and just over on there you can just see the top of a pay bus. Just in the, I've got it arrowed on the photo. That's from 1949. This small building there on the right of the photo is this one here. That's it over there. So you've got the watering tower and that on that side, and that's where the engine was just over there, and the pay bus was just a little bit further behind it. Okay, now you can see here just behind me these floodgates we talked of. Amanda, when were the gates put in? 74. Anyway, they're very well balanced, and one person can open and close them. The only problem is they're locked, so no one can get in and cause trouble. However, that means they've got to have a key to open the locks. So I do understand the SES have put into an order for some extra strong bolt cutters so that if anything happens they can cut the locks. The signal box that we talk about was about halfway between here and the Terezinski Bridge, and just alongside the Terezinski Bridge there was Regent Street Bridge, which you'll often see shown up in the photos. The last train went through here on Friday the 25th of February about 10 past 10. Tommy Shand was the signalman in the box. And then about 10, and there was a lot of people walking to and fro between here and Regent Street because the western end of the long bridge had been washed away, and the only way they could get from Rutherford to Maitland was walking the line, and a lot of people had just been let go from the Bradford cotton mills, and they were trying to get home. Anyway, about 11:15, according to Tommy, there was a sudden rush of water across the line, and there were 6 men trapped, so he called them up into the box, and the other 2, as we said, was Bert Holwood and Frank Conlon. They were on the signal stanchion, and they got dropped over on the thing. Okay, if we look at 15, 16, 17 and 18, these are all from 1951. There was a lack of coal for Sydney due to flooded lines, and that meant severe power restrictions for Sydney. The steam trains could travel through water up to 2 foot 6 inches. After that, the water put the fires out. On Friday the 26th of January 1951, 3,000 passengers per day were being transshipped between High Street Station and Farley and Talara. At one stage there were 1,000 transshipped from Farley in 3/4 of an hour. Since Monday, buses have transshipped 15,000 people, and the Morpeth people were complaining bitterly that their train had been stopped. And as I said before, these trains in those days carried everything. Monday the 29th of January 1951 from the Maitland Mercury. During transshipment operations early yesterday morning, the local firm of undertakers took a corpse from a train and transported it to High Street Station to be taken on to Sydney for burial. Put number 19 out. This is from 1955, and you notice that there is no trains trapped in the platforms. They did learn. Number 20, this is showing number 2 and 3 platform, where we are now. Number 21, it shows 3 men approaching Maitland Station, probably the last to get through the floodwaters. Note the water in the photo is dropping down from the lines into the lower floodwater to the south. The 7 in the box were Tommy Shand, Vince Hughes, Bobby Smith, Joe O'Brien, Dickie Osborne, Arnold Vitnell and Brian. Number 22, the signal box is starting to take the full force of the floodwater from Oakhampton. Note the lean on the pole alongside the box. Number 23 is showing the box collapsed and the helicopter is pulling Vince Hughes and Bobby Smith from the water. We think the first one was Vincey Hughes and Bobby Smith wrapped his arms around Vince. At the inquest, McPhee, the pilot of the helicopter, said that he had the 2 men on the hook and he approached the bridge to land them on the bridge, but as he did so, as he decided to descend, he applied full power but he didn't have enough. Okay, when McPhee realised he couldn't drop these 2 onto the bridge, he swung away from the bridge, and as he did so, the line that Vincey Hughes and Bobby Smith was on swung out. You know yourself, if you've got a line with a weight on it and you swing it, it's going to swing right out in an arc away from you. So that's exactly what happened on the helicopter. And as they did so, the 2 blokes on the hook lost their grip and they fell onto the high tension wires just about here and they were both electrocuted. The coroner said that although only one person touched the wires, they were touching each other, and as far as he was concerned, they were both electrocuted. So that left another 5 because there'd been 7 in the signal box. One of the ones that was in the signal box was Joe O'Brien. He had on an overcoat and a pair of gum boots. And Tommy Shand said to him, he said, "Mate, you're not going to survive with that gear on. Take the coat and the boots off." And he said, "I can't swim, Tommy. I'm done for." And Tommy said, "Well, look," he said, "just take your gear off." The signal box collapsed and Tommy said he tried to jump in with Joe O'Brien, but he said he lost him in the water. And the helicopter had tried to pick him up, but they lost him in the water and that was it. But that left Tommy Shand, Dickie Osborne, Arnold Vitnell and his son Brian. The 4 of them hung onto a piece of timber and wrapped their arms around this piece of timber. And I remember Brian Vitnell, he's on the 37 stories. Amanda's got some of those if you want any. And he said the worst thing was they had their arms wrapped around it. He said, but the flood water was full of insects. So he said within an hour, he said we had all a collar of black insects all around us. And they bit and they scratched and all that. Anyway, after a bit, they found a haystack. So they climbed up onto the haystack and pulled their piece of timber up with them in case the haystack sank. And then they were right around the back of East Maitland and they were yelling out all the time. And someone heard them because a Caves Beach boat, surf boat, came out and pulled them off the haystack. At the inquest, Arnold Vitnell said it was pretty late in the afternoon when this happened. And Tommy Shand, as a true railway employee, said, "Sir, it was 5:40 p.m. when we were pulled off the haystack." 24 of the helicopter crashes into the floodwater. Once the weight dropped off the men's weight dropped off the helicopter, it tipped forward and it lost its propeller and can you still hear me? Yeah. And McPhee decided there was only one thing to do. So he crashed the helicopter into the floodwaters about 100 yards up the line from where we are now. And that helicopter, the wreck to the helicopter was found on Sunday the 24th of April 1955, 2 days before the inquest into the 11 deaths in Maitland.
Where did they find it?
Fishery Creek, just about a quarter of a mile from where it broke, about 300 yards upstream. So there were 3 boys found it. 25 gone out. You can see the fierceness and the turbulence of the floodwater and note the lean of the pole. Ultimately there'd be only a few poles left between Maitland Station and the Regent Street Bridge. Just across here, when we had the old cattle track, there was a road that came up from the from the east, and not as sharp as it is now because you're coming up off the roundabout, but it came around onto there, and that's where a lot of the boats came in to unload their people. We can't get anywhere near it now. So like number 26, number 27 is from 1913. 26, 27 and 28 are all 1913. Number 28 is showing passengers being taken to East Greta. And the Newcastle Morning Herald on the 17th of May 1913 said, the railway between West Maitland and Regent Street is completely submerged and the water is flowing 2 foot deep between the platforms at the railway station. The North Coast signal box was overturned, so the signal box got overturned in 1913, but they still built it again in the same spot. Another one, number 29 from 1930. We think this boat probably had mail bags in it because it's got no people. Number 30 is from 1951 with a boatload of people approaching Maitland Station. Note the water tower on the top left. Number 31, again from 1951, with the boat gone, and we know it was young Tommy O'Rourke at the edge of the water. Now I want you to look back to the west, and number 32 shows a boatload of passengers approaching Maitland Station, probably from East Greta in 1930, I think. If you're looking towards the west, number 33 is looking towards Regent Street and calm waters as the flood waters start to recede. Number 34 shows the duck passing the front of Regent Street Bridge. Note the fishtail coming from the back of the duck and the men standing and looking into the body of the duck. We think this duck was probably taking Bernard Orick, who was being rushed to the hospital for CPR, but it didn't work. I'll talk to you more about that when we get back up the top, and we'll talk about the ducks. The next series of photos show the damage and the relaying of the lines across the wiped out stretch of line between Maitland Station and the Regent Street overhead bridge. The Railway Commissioners reported this distance of 0.523 k's of 6 main tracks consisting mainly of the heaviest rail sections had the embankment washed away and the rails and sleepers lifted by the force of the water, turned over and deposited in a twisted and tangled mass of 100 foot downstream. The maximum depth of water over this section was 17 foot 6 inches. Number 35 and 36. These are from 1913. Number 37 showing the mud or silt on platforms 3 and 4 as mentioned by the Rail Commission. 38 and 39 show the damage just right here at the end of this platform. Number 40 and 41 shows close up to the damage to the rails. Number 42 looking towards Regent Street and the repair work being carried out. The Railway Commissioners reported this is how they repaired the tracks. As the flood subsided, a single track was laid across the flooded area in 4 days, even though the water in places was up to 7 feet deep. In these deeper parts, sleeper fig ties on rafts were floated out into position to facilitate the bridging of the gap. As soon as the track was laid down on the sleeper pigsties, trucks of spoils and metal ballast run out to fill and consolidate the embankment so they could carry the full weight of a train. The first train moved over on the 21st of March, 25 days after the flood. Now that might make sense to you if there's any railway people here, but anyway. The next lot of photos are mainly taken from the Regent Street end of this damaged section. Regent Street Bridge was just this side of the Terracini Bridge. Number 43, 44 and 45. On Monday, the 28th of February, Constable Henry Firth found the body of Frank Dunn just off the edge of that bridge. He came down from Talara to help a mate move furniture, and they were in a ute, and when the force of the water hit the ute, it was turned over into the floodwaters and into Fishery Creek. Number 46 showing only slight damage to the rails just west of Virgin Street Bridge, showing that most of the damage was in this floodway. Number 47, the start of unloading of ballast to fill the washed out embankments. 48, 49 and 50, all showing unloading of more ballast for embankment. Note the washed out rails and the sleeper bottoms on number 49. Righto, we're on number 51. With 2 lines restored, side tippers could now be brought in, and this shows how they can be brought into use. Number 52, train on the restored track. Note the debris caught on the fence in the foreground. There was silt and debris up to a maximum of 3 feet deposited over the whole of Maitland Station and the goods yards. Approximately 14,000 cubic yards of silt was removed from this area. The cost of repairs was over £500,000. I don't know. And another £500,000 in lost revenue. Transshipment started between High Street and Talara and Farley on the 14th of March and continued on full traffic resumption on the 24th. In that 10 days, 80 trains were dealt with, 13,390 passengers and 590 tonnes of parcels were transshipped. Number 53 and 54, an aerial shot and then a close-up showing the closure of these floodgates in the flood of June 2007. You can have a look at number 54A, that's a very important photo, that one. It's showing a couple of people doing a very detailed inspection of the gates. They do a really good job on these gates because they're tested about every 6 months. When there's a shutdown for track work, straight away the first thing is these gates are tested. As I said, they're very well balanced and one person can close them or shut them. We'll go upstairs, and remind me when we get upstairs that I've got to tell you a bit more about the helicopter, and I also got to tell you about the ducks. Look, it's a bit sunny here. What if we go down where it's not as sunny? Righto, will you all come in closer, please? Now, I told you there was something else I had to tell you about the helicopter. Twice, when he was giving evidence at the inquest, the pilot of the helicopter, Lieutenant Commander Gordon McPhee, made 2 statements. That he had applied full power to his helicopter to get out of situations, and they did not work. In other words, didn't have enough power. When these Sycamore helicopters were first designed, they were designed to take a 750 horsepower Bristol Pegasus engine. There was some sort of a political decision made in England. Instead, they were fitted with a 550 horsepower Elvis Leonardis. So that meant, and those Leonardis would only put out 520 on a good day, even though they were rated at 550. So you have to wonder if he'd have had that extra 200 horsepower out of the Bristol Pegasus, would he have had to crash the helicopter in that water? And so that's a question that you always wonder about. Now, I told you I'd tell you about the ducks. On Saturday, the 26th of February, there was it was the same duck that had rescued McPhee and his observer Brendan Hill after the helicopter crashed. This duck was patrolling just south of here. From what we can gather, it was roundabout on the intersection of Park Street and Elgin Street. It had its radio aerial up, and they all thought the wires were dead. Instead, its radio aerial struck 66,000 volt high tension wires. 3 men were thrown into the water. One report said one body went about 15 foot into the air. The ones that were thrown into the water were Sergeant William of the CMS, Signaller Eric Chard of the Regular Army, and Constable of the Maitland Police. Wing Commander Henderson, the Padre of Williamtown Aerodrome, dived into the water and got Garland back aboard. Arlen Garland now lives at Inverell, hale and hearty at the age of about 92. So you can thank Henderson for that. Oric was laying on the back of the duck, and Dr. McCarran was applying CPR and adrenaline trying to get him going. And he said to Hadlow, "Get the duck to the hospital as quick as you can." So I raced to the hospital. I showed you, we saw the photo of what we thought was the fishtail from the duck, and they raced up to Regent Street and then up onto the Steam Street intersection, up Regent Street into the hospital. When they got there, they put Oric into the iron lung, but the hospital had no power. Ted Carl was the cop in charge of operations up at the hospital, so he grabbed 2 young kids, teenagers, Jeff Brown and Warren Howard, and he put them on to manually pump this iron lung without success. We've found out a little bit about those. McGrath's body was found soon after. Eric Chard's body was found 2 days later, floating in the floodwaters at the intersection of Park Street and Elgin Street. He still had the headphones on. The finding of the inquest was that the 3 of them had been electrocuted. We know it was exactly 10:40 because in evidence at the inquest, an engineer for the electric of New South Wales Energy said that the connector at Taro substation had dropped out at exactly 10:40 a.m. We don't know much about Chard. We know that Oric got awarded 2 medals and a police funeral, and he had played first grade rugby union for Gordon and had won a premiership with them. We've been in contact with the family of McGrath. When he died, he left a 9-year-old daughter, Diane, and a 7-year-old son, David, and his wife was pregnant with the 3rd child who was born, and it was called another son called Ian. From what we can gather, the family had a very, very hard time. The mother was English, and she had no friends or relatives out here to back her up. And talking with emails from David, David is still very traumatised about the death of his dad, and they just had a hard time. They sent me a lovely photo last week of the 3 of them, David, Diane and Ian, taken in England because McGrath at age 19 had enlisted in the RAAF, and he was sent to England to train in Bomber Command. As soon as you hear Bomber Command, you know that's big biggies. We've been able to trace his down through the Australian archives. He was 19 when he went to England. He was authorised to fly in Oxford, training 2-engine trainer, which was what they used to train up before they went on their Lancasters. He had 68 and a half hours on the Lancaster, but wasn't qualified to fly it because it was the end of the war, so that's probably saved his life. But it was interesting to chase him up, but he was in the RAAF Squadron 467, which is one of the famous squadrons in World War II from England, and they were under the control of Bomber Command No. 5 Group. It's an interesting thing that in Gordon McPhee's memoirs, he said he was authorised or qualified to captain a Wellington bomber and a Lancaster bomber. So again, you're talking Bomber Command, and Australian Bomber Command is probably Squadron 467. So it's just ironical to think that McGrath was probably on the duck that pulled McPhee out of the water, and they're unknown. They probably have both been in 467 Quadrant in World War II. Anyway, that's given me a good rest. What we're going to do now, we're going to leave here, we're going to walk down to Steam Street, we'll turn right at Steam Street, and then we'll go along to Elgin Street left, and then up as far as the Athol Dombrain, then we're going to walk along Athol Dombrain and then left again down Church Street, and by the time we get home, Amanda should have morning tea with.
So the 49 flood, it was in the morning.
Okay, we need number 55. That's looking from here back up to the station. 56. This is taken from in front of the Cali, a little further up Church Street and looking towards the station. Righto. Now please don't get hit by a car crossing the road. I haven't lost anyone yet. There's always a first time. Righto, 57, 57A and 57B. You're looking through Steam Street to Elgin Street. And you can notice the big two-storey place at the end. It's showing up in the photo. Number 58 is a photo of farmers selling their produce at the old fruit and veg markets that used to be where those two-storey houses are there on our right. 58 is a real historical. The farmers used to come into town in their horses and sulkies and their drays, and they'd sell all the produce at Kennedy's there. And then they'd go and have lunch somewhere at one of the Greek cafes. And of course all the Greek cafes did for Australian meals was steak and onions. We had about 4 Greek cafes along High Street, and they were really good cafes and good people. Is everybody right? Has everyone had 58 and 58 back to the collectors? Righto, let's go. Righto, we want number 59. This is from 1913, and you're looking straight down here to the railway line. And then Newcastle Morning Herald on the 17th of May 1913 said, Walker Street and Lower Elgin Street and the adjoining part of the park with Parallel Street were covered with water. In some places 5 feet deep at 6 o'clock, and many houses were flooded to the windows. Floodboat crews rescued the residents. That was 1913. The same spot from 1955, number 60. Number 61 is exactly the same, except that the floodwaters are gone. And Jim Lucy has used a telephoto lens, so that throws you out. 62. Turn around and look up Elgin Street. And this photo is taken by Jim Lucy, and it shows right up to the top of, you're looking at the building in High Street in that photo, right up the top. So again, he's used his telephoto lens, and if you stand here and look straight up Elgin Street, you're looking straight into that photo. Righto, let's go. Number 63 and 64. We're standing right here, and these photos were taken at the very peak of the floodwaters. Just on that spare block of ground over there was the domestic science block of the Girls High School. They did a fantastic job. The Sallys are in there to organise it. They took over the whole block. Since the previous Thursday the 24th until Tuesday the 1st, they'd served 20,000 meals. And they were hot meals. At its average, it was serving 1,500 meals 3 times a day, so that's 4.5. Large quantities of food was given by Maitland business people, and it was dropped by RWF Dakotas or brought in by ducks. The breakfast menu yesterday gave a choice of chops, sausages, fish and boiled eggs. And last night 600 people passed along a counter were given 2 large slices of bread and butter, meat, vegetables and cake. Milk was obtained when surfboat crews took helpers to farms to milk cows after dairy farms had offered help. They finished up with about 2,000 people in the girls' high school here. And by the Monday, things were desperate. The sewage had broken down, they had no fresh water, and so on the Monday, and we'll see a photo of it later, they loaded 1,000 people into ducks, 20 at a time. They could take 50. They took 20, so there was no danger. And they took them through Bournemouth Hollow to Regent Street, onto buses, and they took them through to Greta Army Camp. Right, let's go. In 55, we'd taken all our furniture and everything out of our home in Horseshoe Bend. We'd taken it up to my father's workshop straight opposite where the Belmore Bridge is now. Unfortunately, the river broke there and took the workshop and everything in it. So about the only thing we had left was a 1954 Holden. My mum had rung us down in Horseshoe Bend a couple of times to say that the water was getting bad and come up and move the car. Finally, she sent my 2 sisters down to tell us, and my dad said the water's never going to get the car there, never get the car there. Anyway, finally said to me, go up and move that car. So I raced up High Street, got to Carrington Hotel, jumped straight through into the water and finished up in the gutter in front of Dimmock's. At 18 you think you're bulletproof, but I wasn't. Anyway, I finally made my way up to the workshop and I didn't know what to do with the car. But in this place here lived Auntie Ada Gibb. So I brought the car down and parked it right there in front of the side gate. As you can see from the previous photos, it didn't even get the tyres wet. So you can be lucky sometimes, but that's all we had left. Righto. Okay, now before they mucked around with these streets, down there was Michael Street. It did a dog leg and then came out here, right here in between the pub and those buildings there. And straight opposite there was the doorway into Pender Brothers, who were quite a big builders, and they did. They had boilermaker shop, they had tinsmith shop, they had beekeeping supplies, they had a joinery shop, whatever you had, they had it. And they were 3 stories high. Now, Pender's timber yard started right alongside this hotel and then went up towards High Street till about almost. It would have gone to where that curved piece is, parking out in the shopping centre there. It would have gone that far. There was a lot of people, including my family, had nowhere to go, and they were camped in Pender Brothers in the timber shed. The timber shed consisted of 2 parts, a fully enclosed where all the milled timber and polished timber was kept, and then there was a skillion roof on that side where all the splintery timber was. And that's where we were. But the main reason you're looking at these two photos is because after the airdrops, the parachutes had to go back to Williamtown. And the only place that the helicopters could land was in that timber yard. And the floor of the timber yard was made up of road mix and gravel and all that. And as the helicopters came down, it was like being hit with a spray of shotgun pellets, because you soon learnt not to get anywhere near them and turn their backs. After the helicopter crashed down at Maitland Station, 9:08, the Minister for the Navy sent word to HMAS Sydney that was cruising off the coast of Victoria, 2 helicopters to Maitland immediately. The Sydney put on full steam towards the coast of Victoria, and they got close enough to fly the 2 helicopters off. They flew into Laverton in Victoria, then up to Williamtown. And McPhee, who'd been the pilot of 908 when it crashed, was the first one to get his backside into one of those helicopters and get moving again. The 2 helicopters that came up were 905 and 906. So you can see in those 2 photos that's, so we've got records to show that 905 and 906 was here. People have tried to say that 907 was here. It was not. 907 was out the west. Everyone good on that? A little family story. My parents were married in 1935, and just after they were married they moved into a house here in Albion Street. My dad worked here at Pender Brothers, and he was up on the top of the lift tower, up on the 3rd floor, checking the lifting mechanism. That had to be done for safety reasons every so often. While he was up there, he heard this terrific crash come from the house where they were living. So, oh, what's gone wrong, what's gone wrong? Anyway, he raced down in the lift, raced out the door, round into Albion Street, and he said to Mum, Kay, what's wrong? She said the bottom dropped out of the box, a brand new dinner set that had been given as a Western present. She picked up the box and it all just went woofter. So that was the crash Dad heard. Okay, we'll just tell you a little bit about the history of Maitland as we go along. And this, as you can probably see from the Star of David over there, was the Jewish synagogue. It was designed by Pender and opened in September 1879. So it's a fairly old building. The synagogue closed around 1897 and finally sold in 26, and a lot of its fittings were moved to the Newcastle synagogue. It was then used as a dance hall for some years, and then they made a garage for Dick Taylor and his trucks. Now Normie Burton, most of you would know, served his apprenticeship with Dick Taylor. And Normie tells the story of he was only an apprentice and someone from Pender's came down and sawed off the Star of David from the top of this building. And no one to this day knows what happened to it. So that's just sad. One of the earliest Jewish citizens was Philip Cohen, who opened a soap factory down on where Cohen's are now, or the Centrelink offices. And in December 1833, he advertised the best yellow soap for 4 halfpenny penny a pound. And he was also the secretary of a race meeting held in July 1833. October 1835, he was appointed deputy postmaster at Maitland. In 1842, he was the publican of the Rose Inn. So you can see the Jewish community were very, very much part of the general community, and they did so much for the early history of Maitland. So we'll move on. We're going to cross the road. Don't get run over. Only cross on the green light. So you got 67 and 68. They're both Banfield Street. '69 is a surf boat leaving St Mary's with people for Regent Street. These are two historic houses built by two people in the grocery trade, Owen and Beckett. As you can see, one's the mirror image of the other, and at the back they had a laundry which they shared. Just where these flats are, Dr. John Fraser was one of the earliest educators in Maitland. He was brought out by McIntyre to work at the school in Free Church Street. After a few years he got sick of McIntyre, as everyone did, and he designed a couple of houses here for the education of boys. The two houses he built were named after castles in Scotland, Saucy House, which means the meadow of willows, and Dorfine House, again named after a castle in Scotland. Is everyone good? Yep. Righto, let's move on. We're nearly home. Now look, these next two photos are important. Number 74, this shows the water and what was happening. The ducks were being loaded here over the period of the day, and they took 1,000 people on the Monday and 1,000 people on the Tuesday. This was Baldwin's Hollow, which was full of water. So they went through here, through the water, and then up into Regent Street, where you can see near the bus there waiting to take them to greet a camp. That photo got nothing to do with this area. It was taken out in front of Maitland Post Office on the morning of Sunday the 19th of June 1949. But it's the best photo we got to show you how the alligators and the ducks had high sides. They were designed to come off a landing craft and go straight into a beach. They cannot handle strong side currents. So that's why it was only the surf boats that could get out there in the middle of that water on the Saturday morning and rescue so many people. There was no one else could handle that water. On the Saturday alone, the boats from Nobby's, Merryweather, Belmont Caves and Redhead went out into the floodway along Oakhampton, and on that day alone they pulled people out of trees, off the roofs of houses, inside the roofs of houses, and they rescued 400 people. Those lifesavers rode until their hands were red and raw. And then they wrapped them up again in bandages and went out and rode again. The city of Maitland owes the surf clubs of Newcastle a wondrous debt of gratitude. But look, I just want to thank you again for coming. You've been a great group, so thank you very much for being here today and being such a great group.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, just a little story about me.
He can never help himself. He was in my class at school.
That building is where I first had an alcoholic drink. I was a young apprentice at the gas company, and after the flood started to go down, the water had got into all the gas mains, and they had these little pipes up out of the ground with a light on them so that the boats wouldn't knock them over, but the flood got deeper from the pipes. So anyhow, they dumped me in the water over the other side of Maitland Railway Station there to put an extension on this pipe, and then they put the light back on top and pumped the water out, and I was absolutely freezing. And the fellow I was working with, he said, "Come on, I'll buy you a drink." And we went in there and he got me a rum and milk or something. And by jeez, it was good. Anyhow, that's it. Yeah.